So I've been learning 3D animation in Blender for about 60 days now. And after countless hours of mostly struggling, but a little bit of succeeding, this is what I've learned. So, to mark my 2-month journey, I wanted to create a project that would hopefully demonstrate the skills I've learned. I decided that I'll remake a character from Genshin Impact, Zhongli. Why Zhongli, you ask? Well, if you've seen my last videos, it is quite apparent that my characters lack complexity in their design. So, I want to give myself a challenge and see if I can model and create a more complex character. So with that in mind, we first start with sculpting. About 2 months ago, I knew nothing about character creation. I never drew 2D art, and I never once sculpted a 3D character. So let me tell you the most important things I've learned so far. Learn the basics. I know, I'm sure you've been told that from mostly everything in your life, whether that be with art or not, but it's for a good reason. Trying to create a complex character on day 1 and thinking that the result will look good could maybe work for some, but for most likely not. We get caught up in trying to get the results we want fast, so we skip all the necessary steps. You don't have to go crazy on this, but just try to learn the fundamentals, like body proportions, at least, because even that will get you a long way. Be okay with okay. Yeah, I know that sounds really weird, but hear me out. Don't go for perfection, because you probably are not going to reach it. And yeah, that sounds super demotivating, but it's part of the process. You have to first create bad things to create good things. You have to put in the effort. You aren't going to see results magically. You have to dedicate the time. Anyway, with that aside, I created Zhongli. And the outcome was pretty decent, but not perfect. But it was a good demonstration of what I've learned up until this point. Also, I tried to go for a little more realistic style than my last 2 characters, just trying to experiment with what I might enjoy making the most. Next up, we have to rig the character. And this is where the project turned a complete 180. If you are unfamiliar with rigging, it's just giving the character bones so you can animate them. So I did my usual process of using the built-in rig that Blender has. But I soon realized that a lot of the clothes, like the cloths it has on the outfit, did not behave the way I'd want them to when I moved the rig around. So I thought, I'll just make a completely new rig, which was one of the worst, but also maybe the best decisions I could have made. You'll see why. So for the next 3 days, I invested all my free time into learning how to rig a character from scratch. This involved creating deformation bones that will deform the character, weight painting every single bone, basically how much the bone will affect that area of the body, red indicating that it will affect the bone 100%, and blue meaning it won't affect the bone at all. Then going a little more in depth to the bones of adding forward kinematics and inverse kinematics to each of these bones. And from my knowledge, these are just bones that make the body behave in different ways, each having benefits of their own in different scenarios. Then finally adding a bit more bones to tweak smaller parts of the body for more precise movements. Throughout this entire process, I was losing my mind and was really thinking of giving up. But I kept pushing through, and I know that if I did, I'd be thankful. So after countless mess ups, countless hours on end having to redo everything from scratch multiple times, I finished my character rig. Now everything like the clothes should behave the way I want them to, right? Because I made the rig myself. Unfortunately, I wouldn't really say this was true, but I also wouldn't say that the rig I created is worse than the given one. It's just not 3 days worth better. But hey, you live, you learn, and I'll keep on improving my rigs for future projects. Over these 2 months, I definitely have not put as much time into 3D animating as I would have liked. The time has been mostly just getting used to Blender software and learning character modeling. But I do hope to learn more about 3D animation in the future. So with that, I moved on to the animation process of Zhongli. So my idea in mind was to have Zhongli fight a giant army on his own, like the typical one versus an army fight scene. So with that in mind, I got to animating. And over the course of these 2 months, let's just say I've learned that 3D animation is way harder than it looks. 3D animation in itself and all the fundamentals I have barely touched, but the biggest obstacle I keep facing is the fact that the clothes oftentimes don't follow the original character when moving the rig, meaning that there will be a lot of poses that I want my character to do, but I'm oftentimes limited because the clothes will not follow in a good looking way for that pose. So I've been thinking a lot on this issue and was wondering if it's maybe better to join everything together, then rig my character, so that the clothes aren't separate pieces to the main body. So after animating for quite a while, I moved on to creating some of Zhongli's cool skills. Over these 2 months, like animating, I haven't put as much time as I would have wanted into texturing, so this definitely was a bit more challenging for me. But for his shield effect, I just played around with a lot of noise textures, emission shaders, and transparent shaders to get a decent look. And for his pillar, I just used a cube and modeled it and textured it as well, doing the same for his weapon. In this time, I've learned when modeling stuff like this, it's very useful to just trace a reference image, then extrude the parts to give it the 3D look. Then for the overall environment, which I still need to get way better at in terms of environments because I've barely touched on them in this time, but I did a very simple desert landscape. Now, with most of the scene aside, I just want to talk about how hard it has been to render this project. I never thought rendering would be such a big problem, but here we are. There would be many times when trying to render this project that I would just see the message GPU out of memory or time estimated per frame 1 hour. And for a project like this with over 500 frames, there's no way I'm waiting 1 hour for every single one. There are so many settings to optimize renders, so I made sure to adjust them accordingly. For example, turning down the number of samples it has to compute. And while I know it will take down the quality quite a bit, it's not that noticeable. And also making sure to use only the necessary amount of quality levels for all my objects, so that it doesn't have to compute such detail in each object. And in doing these, it also helped to fix my problem of my GPU being out of memory when trying to render the scenes. So after all this, and now taking it into After Effects to do some final touches, let's just say my 3D animation skills need so much work, and still the overall scene. But I really wanted to finish this project in time for a 2-month milestone, so I did end up rushing quite a few things. And before the final video, these are the top 2 lessons I've learned over these past 2 months. Number 1, we tend to overestimate what we can do in a day, but underestimate what we can do in a year. I think this quote embodies what it means to try to learn a new skill. We get so caught up in wanting results fast that we get burnt out or demotivated because we aren't seeing the immediate results day by day. You just have to keep struggling because succeeding only comes through struggling. Number 2, don't compare yourself to others. The reason I started this entire 3D animation / Blender journey was because of all the amazing work I've seen done by 3D animation, in films and on YouTube. So it's often very hard to not compare myself to the reason why I started. But you have to remember you don't know what they did to get there, nor do you know how much work or effort they are doing to keep their level. So for lesson number 2, just ask yourself, is what you are doing today getting you closer to where you want to be tomorrow? Sorry for the app session, but I hope this video helped to encourage or inform anyone who's trying to seek out a new skill. Because like everyone says, the best time was to start 10 years ago, but the second best time is to start right now.